Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome to a new episode of Dads from the Crypts. My name is Jason. I'll be your host. And today we have two gruesome brothers. I'm trying to think of something that rhymes with B. We have Josh and Thommy, and they are definitely EC fanatics. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks, Jason.
But most importantly, you guys run the EC Fanatics Facebook group. Is that correct?
Close. It's Fan Addicts.
I keep saying it wrong. Fanatics. Why
Important
don't you tell our
distinction,
listeners?
Although we are fanatics.
That's true.
Fan addicts. Why don't you tell our listeners about your group?
Josh?
Thommy started the group in 2013, and we say we are co-admins, but he's really the founding admin because he brought me on maybe 5 minutes after he started the group. So he's been an admin 5 minutes longer than I have of the group. But we've been collecting ECs our whole lives. Thommy discovered a book at the library when I was 8 and he was 10, and changed our lives. And so then when he started the group on Facebook, we just, I don't know, I guess our love and passion for the comics was obvious, and people kept coming to the group. And 11 years later, Thommy will know, I don't even know how big we are. Last I checked, we had like 13,000 members of the group or something.
Just hit 14,000 members.
Congrats.
So thank you. Yeah, it's. I'm glad Josh mentioned it goes back so much farther than the start of the group, because for us, we've had our own two-brother EC fan addict group since 1979. But it's funny. There was an EC Comics group that I was trying to join at the time, and one night I was sitting around having a few beers, and I thought, well, they keep not letting me in this group. What's up? I've got some cool stuff to share. And in one of those, silly moments that you have, I thought, I'll start my own group, and no one's using the name of the original official club, so why don't I use that? And very fortunately, we've got multiple Gaines family members in the group now, and no one ever objected to us calling ourselves the EC Fan Addict Club. And at this point, I've had first-generation members of the original club say, wow, I never knew about this extension of our club. And I thought, oh, that's just brings a tear to my eye, So I think we are kind of unofficially and semi-officially recognized as the modern EC Fan Addict Club. So that's been great.
Yeah, over the course of doing this podcast, I've looked for all the different kinds of fan groups that I could find out there, and yours is definitely the most robust that I've come across.
Pretty active.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, today we're going to be reviewing the latest issue of Epitaphs from the Abyss, number 2.
Episode of Epitaphs.
Episode of Epitaphs. I've got my head in the Tales from the Crypt show is where my heart. That's where my heart really lies, and by extension, EC. But that was my gateway. So that's my frame of reference.
Well, it's a beautiful point to make, because regardless of how people felt about the HBO TV show, or how people now feel about the Oni EC Comics, anything that brings people into learning more about this amazing publishing company is a good thing. I mean, yes. All of it has the potential to educate and bring new people into it.
I mean,
exactly.
He has even made fun of, jovially made fun of the cartoon.
That's the whole other.
But even that
extension of an extension.
I think even that is fun, because
yeah,
get them while they're young.
Exactly. Well, and one of the things I really enjoyed, we've finished reviewing all the Tales from the Crypt TV episodes. One of my favorite things we did was we would compare each episode to the original comic.
Yep.
And some of them were very based on it, but with some modern twist, and some just used the name only. Like they couldn't come up with anything. So
unrecognizable. Yeah.
Yeah. It was I always got a kick out of some of those.
In one instance, they literally adapted a different EC using the name of Revenge is the Nuts.
Yep.
They adapted Blind Alleys and called it Revenge is the Nuts.
Yeah.
What?
Like I said, whatever gets people reading, I'm happy for it.
Sure.
All right. So in this episode, we get another wonderful intro by the Gravedigger, drawn again beautifully by Dustin Weaver.
Yeah.
I really love this character. I kind of would like to see some of the other ones step up to the plate, but so far, it's really cool.
Yeah, those 2 pages in those, the first and second issue now are my favorite pages. And maybe I am, revealing myself to be an old school EC Comics fan, but that horror host introducing just made me want to see that at the beginning and end of every story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those had the real flavor of the old EC.
I love Dustin Weaver's work too. His art on the hosts, or the one we've seen so far, but we've seen some other art of the hosts who are coming as well, and I think that guy's just knocking it out of the park. I love what he's doing.
He's kind
but like you, I'm looking forward to seeing the other hosts who are coming. What is it, issue 3 or 4, I think, where the other two are supposed to be introduced?
I haven't heard anything official.
What they talked about in that panel. I know there's plans for the other hosts. We just haven't.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what 100 panel, but there's definitely a plan to bring the other two on.
Cool.
I wish they had been there from the beginning, from issue number 1, but
we got time.
And Josh mentioned paper cuts, and I was thinking a lot about this because on the EC Fan Addict group page, there's a lot of people who are adamantly, vehemently opposed to new horror hosts. Why aren't they using the old ones? And it just points up to me the really, really difficult position that Oni is in. Because if you think about paper cuts, they did use the old horror hosts. They used the Vault Keeper and the Old Witch and the Crypt Keeper, and they called it Tales from the Crypt. And on the one hand, it was nothing at all like the original EC Comics. And on the other hand, it really didn't help them. And when they rebooted again as Super Genius, again with Tales from the Crypt, and again with the old horror host, it only lasted 2 issues. And I had high hopes for it, and I wished it would do well. But clearly it didn't help. So, I can understand why they wanted to introduce new titles and new hosts. And yes, they still use that EC emblem, but right out of the gate, I think they're letting us know we're not trying to reheat a souffle here. We're doing something new. We're going in our own direction. You might hate that new direction, but we're going to take it in a new direction.
Well, I think, it's a knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh, I want the old stuff. But in reality, it would not work.
Yeah, and we have the old stuff.
Yes, it doesn't. That's my favorite thing.
Take away the old stuff.
Yeah, whenever a movie gets rebooted or something like that, I'm like, no one's taking the original away from you, unless they're like,
they ruined the original. No,
they didn't.
Except for like Lucas, who goes back and like literally changes it, but that's a whole other thing. We're not going down that road.
If Oni starts redoing the original stories, then okay, everybody, I'll support your hatred.
Yeah, but I think they're way too smart to try that. So, okay, so we've got the Gravedigger. He's got like a red balloon, kind of like it Pennywise style. He's got some demonic kids. All great intro. Our first segment is called Pattern Recognition. This one is a little confusing. It's sort of a story about a fascist group, and they have a fascist leader. And one of their someone in their ranks gets injured with a nail through his head, and they surgically remove the nail, and he keeps it as like an emblem. And then he has this idea that their leader is more than the man, is an idea, and the idea needs to be let out. So he ends up killing him with the same nail. It's kind of
I read it several times, and I think I shared your confusion because the reason I read it several times was I didn't know what the hell was going on. And that imagery of the nail in the head obviously sticks with you, but I was having a really hard time putting it together. And you said it's kind of like a fascist organization, but also there's one part where they say, we know he's not a god, but then I think that's there to point out that they really do view him as a god. And it's kind of cult-like, the way they follow this guy.
Yes.
And so then I started to think, is this just some kind of a modern allegory? Is this some kind of, the way we embrace media celebrities or politicians and we follow them blindly, unquestioningly, and then everything takes on this oddball significance, like the nail. This is the nail, I didn't feel like it had a great story arc. I didn't feel like it had a good beginning, middle, and an end. But then as maybe a modern illustration of the fervor with which we follow our idols and our cult leaders. Maybe that's all it was trying to convey.
Yeah, and even now, like having read this many times over, I'm wondering if the nail is supposed to be something about like Jesus and the cross, but then I kind of feel like we're giving way too much credence to things that aren't actually in the story. And
I was going to say, you guys dug way deeper than I did with this story.
Give us your thoughts.
Well, my thought, I read this as what I enjoyed about it is it was sort of the comic book equivalent of a Walter Hill or John Carpenter movie to me.
okay,
It was The Warriors. It was Escape from New York.
Yes.
And it was just come out to play. And so I enjoyed it on that level, but I also, honestly, I kind of share you guys' confusion at the ending. Like, I get what was happening. I'm not confused about what was happening, but it wasn't really an ending. It was just sort of like the whole story was kind of this weird disjointed snapshot, and I think that was probably intentional because it's being told by a guy who's had a nail in his brain and has been wonked out from that. But I feel like that one of the things that some people say in comparing the new comics to the old comics is the old comics, Feldstein was very wordy with the stories he wrote, and the new stories are not at all wordy. And some people see that as a bad thing. I just see it as that's the evolution of comic books. But I feel like this story could have benefited from a little more words because it feels very sort of
well, the old axiom is show don't tell, and this doesn't seem to be doing much of either. Like if there is a point of view they're trying to get across, there isn't enough meat for us to grasp onto it.
Show don't tell axiom for movies, whereas comic books involve prose. Like you have to do telling.
Help me out here.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing we noticed at Comic-Con when we all got our first look at the first Epitaphs was, well, where's the words? Where's the text? EC was, sometimes comically text heavy. And these are the opposite of that. But with this first story, I think the other thing that we noticed was, okay, one of the traditions of EC Comics was the snap ending. And this story, if that was the snap ending, the last thing you want is to go, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I think in terms of story ideas, I like what the story is doing. It just felt like it was a glimpse of what the story was doing.
Yeah. It felt...
It was kind of like it was an EC preachy without a clear moral.
All right, let's move on to the next one. This is called Gray Green Memories. And this does a device that I really like when they do in movies, is where they try to tell a story from the monster's perspective, especially a zombie perspective. So here we're kind of, we're with a woman who's obviously a zombie or ghoul or whatever you want to call her. Just kind of staring at a grocery aisle, specifically a can of baby food, trying to like recapture or remember something, but she's just kind of there. And we're kind of hearing a monologue within her head. And we kind of get little flashes back to kind of the plague and how she kind of ran into the grocery store. And eventually there is another mother and child that sneak into the grocery store looking for supplies. And the zombie attacks them and they hit her with a shotgun. Her head flies off and kind of lands, but in the exact same position she was in before, still staring at the exact same can of baby food. And Josh, when we were talking about this earlier, you made a great observation about circular storytelling.
Yeah.
So why don't you reiterate that?
Well, that's what I really enjoyed about this story. This is not just my favorite story of this issue, but I think my favorite story in Epitaphs so far. And yeah, it's, as Thommy said, we're used to with EC's stories, like the classic paradigm is that twist ending. that we all love. And this story doesn't have a twist ending, but it does something else that EC was really good at, and lots of people are good at, but we're talking about EC right now. Is that circular narrative where the story basically ends exactly where it began, and it's such a good narrative device if used well, and I feel like here it was used really well, because you do have the difference that she's been attacked by these people now, and now she's just a head laying on the floor, but she's looking at the same thing, like you said, and quote unquote thinking the same thoughts, and it really works. Like, this story really works, and the art I thought was fantastic. Thommy and I have always loved a good reanimated corpse, and I do think it's funny, Jason, that you made the point, like, Thommy will fight forever, and I'm on his side, that zombies are one thing and reanimated corpses are another thing, and we try not to be too pedantic about it, but we firmly believe it.
But we still managed to be very pedantic about it.
It's true.
One of the first photo albums I did in the EC Fanatic Club page was called Zombies versus Reanimated Corpses. And it was me going story by story, telling why this one is a zombie and qualifies, but this one's a reanimated corpse that came back for vengeance. And I guess pedantic would be the way to describe it.
Thommy, what'd you think of this segment?
Well, this one with the reanimated corpse, it was my favorite in this issue for sure. I'm not sure if it was my favorite out of both issues so far, but part of the reason was I would call the artwork more classic comic book art, and I fully admit that I'm not up on modern comics. I have always said I'm not a comic collector, I'm an EC collector. So if it is EC Comics or any of the ephemera or history related to EC, that's what I'm all about, but I don't really keep up with comic books through the decades, certainly not right now. So some of the art for me is it's not my cup of tea. But this one, I really like the art, and I love a good reanimated corpse story. And kind of the same thing with the first story for me. There wasn't that story arc that I'm used to. It was more of just a snapshot in time. And when you talk about comparing it to a film, it was like a clip of film. And you're watching this episode occur. But the thing I liked about it a lot that, EC Comics always had no trouble tugging at your heartstrings. And there were stories I read as a kid, especially from EC, that made me cry. And there was one in particular where I was trying to tell my mom about this story, and I was bawling. I couldn't even talk. And this story has a lot of sympathy for that dead lady. And you feel empathy for her, and you don't know why, and you don't know what happened, you don't know what her story is. But the fact that she's staring kind of lost at this can of baby food saying something's important. What am I here for? It's really important. You don't know what it is, but that tells a story in itself. What is it about this this jar of baby formula that begins and ends the story? And okay, she's a reanimated corpse. We don't know how she got this way, but she was once a person, and she had these feelings, and she's starting to feel some of these feelings. And then, of course, the undead, the living people come in and blow her head off. But then, as you said, the head is then laying on the ground looking at the jar of baby formula saying, this is important. What am I here for?
Right. Yeah, it's funny because I think it's a common trait in horror fans to empathize more with the creature than you do the humans. I remember watching I remember watching Frankenstein or Godzilla, and when they killed the monster at the end of the movie, I always cried for the monster.
Yeah. King Kong falling off the Empire State Building, you went. All your emotion was for King Kong. It's that same, it's that same vibe.
Hey, Mighty Joe Young ends the way it does is like to make up for King Kong. We're also
as a happy ending.
Yeah.
This lady in this story, it's definitely taps into that emotional vibe.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. And then the last segment is called Sounds and Haptics. So here is a story about a young man who was in a car accident. He was texting while driving. He wakes up in some sort of hospital bed, but he's not in a hospital. But there is a woman with a syringe who's doing some sort of medical care, but it becomes very obvious that it's not really legit, and he's missing some fingers, and he starts missing more and more. It's kind of like a Stephen King's Misery situation. And we get some more flashbacks to the crash
It
itself.
is really. Someone's
Yeah,
taking care of him, but really not.
but really not. We get a lot of flashbacks to kind of what's happening. He keeps hearing the phone pinging, and we come to find out that
Sorry, guys, my house is haunted. If you're hearing that.
all right. We come to find out that he killed a family in the accident, and I think this woman, I don't think they say if it's the mother or what the exact relationship is, but basically he killed this woman's family with the accident, and we see that he's been texting with a woman, and then in the end, he kind of tries to get out of there. He sees his phone, but then he realizes that he has no hands left. She cut off his hands. And he's like, again, still trying to reach for his phone. He looks at it, he sees he's got 48 missed calls, 279 unread messages, 27 voicemails. But then the woman says, there's no police, no one's coming for you, no one's around for miles, and I'm not done with you yet. And she smashes the phone,
Misery.
drugs him again, and then drags him back. And even though the phone is smashed, he still hears the ping, ping, ping from the phone, even though he's just like this husk where his legs have been amputated, his arms are amputated, he's like all gaunt and shriveled. And then we finally, at the end, we have all the sympathy for him that, yeah, he was texting while driving. Not a good thing to do, but does he deserve this? And then we see the last shot, which I love this. We see what he was texting to this woman, and it says, lame, so fat now, you might as well DI, and then cuts off. So we found out that he was cyberbullying someone while driving.
Some
Yeah.
woman while he's driving. And before that, we got a hint that he was an a-hole because at the accident scene, he asks for his phone. Like it's horrific. The art in this one really doesn't hold anything back. And there's this whole family, including children, just dead and maimed and in pieces on the road. And he's going, can I have my phone back?
Yeah.
So any sympathy you might have had for him at that point, you go, wait a minute.
Well,
and then at the end.
Well, one counterpoint is that, sometimes when you're in the traumatic event, you're not thinking clearly, you're not fully aware of the situation. Just throwing that out as a possibility.
That's a possible counterpoint. But the story,
yes,
it's all ping, ping, ping all the way through the story.
Yeah.
So you already know that the phone is a central thing and that he's really preoccupied with his phone. So whether he was in shock at the moment, he's consciously very aware of my phone. I need my phone all the way through. Josh and I were talking about this and earlier with you actually, and he made a great point about this story that I think I'll let him elaborate further, but there's a couple things about this story that may bode well for this EC Comics reboot. One is that I feel like they're on the right track with trying to have these message stories and what EC Comics affectionately and their fans called their preachies. I mean, they're called preachies for a reason. They were literally preaching at you. They had a moral. And you might not agree with whatever their social or political point was, but there was a moral to the story. And even if this one is as simple as don't text and drive, there's a little more to it. It's a little deeper when it shows what he was texting. And so although it's I've got to say it's far from at the level of the greatest of the EC preachies. We're still talking about him 70 years later. But it's also on the right track. And the other thing, and I'll let Josh kind of run with this one, no, it's not at the level of EC Comics, the original EC Comics. But it is approaching, with this story, certainly the level of PC Comics from the 80s. And that's not a bad thing. No. That's another indication that it's on the right track.
Yeah, anytime you're trying to get across a message, it's really about nuance. And this one might go a little heavier than we would like, but they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And the art and the storytelling, again, I can't say it better than Josh. It's like Pacific Comics.
Yeah, very much. When I read this story, I sort of emotionally harkened back to reading Twisted Tales in the early 80s, and this story is very much in line with what Bruce Jones was doing with all those stories, because Bruce Jones every now and then would get a little preachy with his stories too, in a good way. and so yeah, I had a very PC vibe from this, but that makes sense to me. Like some people might say, well, these are supposed to be ECs, not PCs. But the thing is, and I'm gonna try not to go too soapboxy about this, but you guys have actually both heard me say this before. But for the viewers who haven't heard it before, the thing is that these comics are a product of evolution. And the evolution is not original ECs begat the new Oni ECs. The original ECs begat the Warren magazines, Creepy and Eerie and stuff like that. And then from that came PC comics and what Bruce Jones and April Campbell were doing there. And immediately following that, when PC shut down, Eclipse picked up the torch and did Tales of Terror and Encounters and stuff. And Cat Ironwood was carrying on the what was started there with PC. But since then, we've had sort of innumerable indie anthology horror comics.
Right.
And what Oni is doing now is the evolution of all of that. So to look at it and say it's supposed to be exactly like original EC doesn't make sense, because there is a generational evolution of comic storytelling.
I mean, that's one of the most unrealistic arguments against, or I guess the most, I don't know. It's not a valid argument to say I have a problem with these because they're a continuation of EC. Everything that's happened in the last 70 years has been a continuation of EC.
Right.
You know,
That's a very good
Warren
point.
wasn't the next EC. PC wasn't the next EC. They were all influenced by and based on what that was, but they were also based on the thing that happened the year before.
Right.
You know, Warren, Bronze Age horror with DC and Marvel, you know, and then the independence and the black and white revolution in comics, and all of that stuff has happened. So it's not a continuation of EC. And
Right.
the people who really object to it on that basis, well, you know what? We survived paper cuts. We survived Super Genius. Those had EC emblems on the cover. Those had the original horror hosts, you know. Give it a few issues. At least I'm giving it a few issues to see where they go. Because right now they're at, you know, ground zero for what they may become.
Right. I mean, you both brought up a great point that these don't exist in the vacuum.
Right.
They're irrelevant of anything that's happened between the last 70 years.
Yep. But yeah,
Yeah.
so this last story, to get back to the story we're talking about, I did enjoy it, and but like Thommy said, it does not pull any punches with the art. It's very graphic, and that was another thing that made me think of PC and what Bruce Jones and all his artists were doing at that time.
They could, so they did.
They could, so they did. And this story can, so it does. But one thing, and this is a minor disagreement you and I had the other day, Jason, but I feel like the order of panels on the final page, I think, should have been changed. Because for a horror story, like I get, and you made a great point, and I actually have thought about it a lot since we talked about it the other day. But
Thank you.
like having the sort of the punch be that he was, you know, cyberbullying somebody, and that's a reveal at the end. That is important, and it makes sense to me that that's a good ending. But I still feel like for a horror story, that should have been the penultimate panel, and the final panel should have been the one of the guy laying in the bed with his arms and legs and nose and eyeball cut off, and saying, you know, that if my phone's gone, why can I still hear it pinging? I still feel like that should have been the last panel, but I do get, and I do agree with you that having the punch of what he was doing with cyberbullying is a good way to end.
Maybe the Burns brothers are destined to agree, but yeah, that the final panel being the goriest one would have been the Good Lord choked panel in EC. They would have saved the gore for that last Good Lord choke moment.
Yeah, I mean, now that I thought about that conversation too in the last couple of days, it could really go either way.
Yeah.
It's one of those, you know, either one probably would work. I don't think it would really, one way detracts from the other. I can see arguments for both, but yeah. just to round things out a little bit, as much as I like this one, it's still like not. There's still it's still a couple of rough edges,
Yeah.
um, compared to the middle episode, the zombie woman or undead reanimated corpse woman. That's just more of a word salad. That one to me is the most of all the segments in the first episodes. That is the most complete, well-rounded episode. That makes you think and feel something while still having some gore and some, some umph to it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of my. And the first one is just really half baked. It really could have used another couple drafts. So
I
that's
wish that
my overall review.
the first issue was 4 stories, and maybe that's me being old school again, but I would love to see that EC Comics formula of 4 stories where every EC, for the most part, with few deviations, had an 8-pager, 7-pager, 6-pager, and another 7-pager, and that was the story formula. Now, I don't expect Oni to use that exact same layout, but the first one having 4 stories, I thought they were short, they were punchy, you moved on to the next story. If the stories get too long, I think then we're getting away from the punchy horror anthology formula. But it's 3 stories; it's not a big deal. That's more like actually the Bronze Age horror from DC would have 3 longer stories or even 2 long stories.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. You get to like House of Mystery, you get like 10, 11-page stories, stuff like that. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I know we're not here to talk about Creep Show, but I will say that's one of the things
Well, let's not.
I feel like could be improved in the new Creep Show comics is the stories are a little long and there's only 2 stories per issue.
Well, and this is my soapbox with especially TV, especially streaming shows that like the 10 episodes. I always feel like there's like at least 2 or 3 filler that kind of spins its wheels, and I'm like, well, you could really you have the ability to have the episodes be as long or as short as you want. I guess they have to fill a certain amount of hours of content, but I really appreciate when things are as long.
There's always the episode where they spend the whole episode with a backstory of one of the characters, and the plot doesn't advance.
Right. You can always tell those apart. All right. Do you guys have any final thoughts on this issue?
I would say, it's another good step. It's, and they're just getting started. So that's what, like anything that we have said in this episode that we're like, yeah, that could be improved, or that, I guess sticking with that, they know that things can be improved and they're looking to do that. And Thommy and I have talked with Thommy more than me, but we've talked with Hunter, who's publishing these, and he knows they're just getting started, and he's really into evolving the comic book into something.
Well, he sent me an email the other day that said that he knew that Epitaphs #1 was their War Against Crime 10. And for those who don't know the EC history, War Against Crime #10 was the first appearance of the Vault Keeper. From there, look what they did. So who knows what they're going to be able to do. But also at the panel, something that he had said was that in looking over the stories, he felt that with Epitaphs #4, they were really, really hitting their stride. Well, here we are. We've had issue 1 and 2. Let's see what happens,
Yep.
Well, and then if you're looking at the back towards the back of the comics for the upcoming, we've got something we've never seen before. Is a special, looks like a Christmas edition, suspense stories, which I'm very into, a holiday themed. And then they announced another one. I don't know if this is going to be ongoing or what, but coming in January, we get Cruel Kingdom, which
I believe it will be ongoing. I think it's going to take over Cruel Universe's spot.
Oh, okay.
Because Cruel Universe and Epitaphs from the Abyss were going to be 6 issues. That was the original plan. And then the success of the pre-orders on Epitaphs, they have already extended it to 12 issues. But Cruel Universe is going to do it 6 issues, and then Cruel Kingdom will take over. And I think they're really just trying to see where it's going to click, what's going to be their groove.
Yeah, but the art for Cruel Kingdom, I don't know what the hell that thing is, but it's badass. It's like, it looks like a sci-fi fantasy mashup of a robot with a a huge sword and a cloak and a crown kind of hovering on. I don't know what the hell it is, but it looks badass.
It looks cool, and it's something that EC didn't exact. They had Valor, which was kind of
Mhm.
old time medieval sort of action, but this is more like swords and sorcery, and I'm sure they can mix in some supernatural and things.
Yeah,
It's
and it's kind of cyberpunk maybe. I don't know what the hell it is, but
yeah.
it looks like the T-800 um in King Arthur's
Like
court or something like that.
just in swords and sorcery, like again, that would be sort of harkening back to another age, because those were super popular, like in the '70s with Marvel
Yeah.
magazines and stuff like that, and like what Wood was doing, all that like super swords and sorcery and the Conan books and
Yeah.
like it would be cool to see them doing stuff like that. So we don't know exactly what it's going to be, but the speculation is fun.
So much of that Flegel stuff was like that. You mentioned Williamson and Angelo Torres and Roy Krinkle were doing this kind of art, and they were doing a lot of stuff for Conan or Tarzan or that Edgar Rice Burroughs art that they were doing. The Reed Crandall stuff. There's great potential for this. I know your episode isn't about forecasting what we think that might be, but there's more to come. It'd be foolish to write it all off simply because we're upset that they use an EC logo.
But we're
All
not.
right. Well,
Other people.
before I let you guys go, is there anything you want to plug? Any upcoming projects you want to talk about?
We did just find out that Josh and I are going to be the fan guests of honor at the San Diego Comic Fest in October.
Yep.
So they're going to be celebrating the 100th anniversaries of Harvey Kurtzman and Rod Serling. So that's quite a combination.
Yeah.
So Josh and I will be unbelievably guests of honor for that. It's going to be in Carlsbad the last weekend in October. And before I hand it over to Josh, I've been spending the whole morning working on the introduction for the next Fantagraphics EC Artist Library volume, which is going to be Wallace Wood Science Fiction. And it's for the first time, John Gothold, fellow admin of the EC Fanatic Club, and I are writing the introduction together. And so we've been emailing back and forth. We've got our pieces done, and we're kind of putting them together now. So I'm really excited about that because it's the first time that we'll have 3 people collaborating on the introductory essays, and that's going to be me and John Gothold and Grant Geisman. So that's what I'm working on currently. And next month, Jack Davis Foul Play in the EC Artist Library series. That'll come, and that's one that both Grant and I worked on. So that's really exciting. It's going to be massive. It's going to be, I think, the thickest book in the series so far. So that's coming.
Very cool.
Well, Thommy said he was going to kick it over to me, but Comic Fest in October is kind of the only thing I've got coming up. He's got all these books coming up. I haven't written anything that's going to be published anytime soon.
We'll have WonderCon and Comic-Con coming.
Yeah.
So in the next year, we have multiple conventions coming, and I hope to write some stuff that will see publication at some point, but nothing is anywhere close enough to announce yet. So my announcement...
Well, Josh is being super humble, but he did write an article for the last Alter Ego with the Angelo Torres special issue, and he also wrote a couple articles for Horror from the Crypt of Fear, which they've got a new issue that's going to be coming, I think, in the spring. I don't want to misspeak, but Horror from the Crypt of Fear has risen from the dead, and they're back. So apart from Squatron, I don't think any EC fanzine has had more issues than Horror from the Crypt of Fear, and I actually think they've surpassed Squatron now.
I think that's correct.
Cool.
So there's exciting stuff happening.
Yeah. Just a couple of things I want to plug as well for anyone who might not be haven't watched the regular Dads from the Crypt show. We're a podcast where me and 2 other bearded fathers. We've been doing staff picks, just our own favorite movies lately, but we have done the entire Tales from the Crypt TV series that you can go back and watch. We have interviews with people who worked on the show, such as William Sadler, John Cassier, a bunch of the directors and producers that worked on the show. So all that is out on any podcast provider. A lot of them are on YouTube. We didn't start doing YouTube until like halfway through. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can only go back so far on that one, but you can listen to the audio and everything. Also, I want to announce that I have been working on a documentary about Mike Vosberg, who did all of the opening comics from Tales from the Crypt, the TV show. And he even did like some commission work for William Gaines that he had hung up in his office. And that and that documentary is going to be having its premiere at LA Comic Con. I just found out on the first Saturday in October, I think at noon, in one of the exhibition halls. So it's the first time I'm mentioning it. So I'm very excited for that. If anybody wants to come by and say hi, please, I'd love to hear from anyone.
That's great.
That's going to be attending. Yeah, really excited.
Foz is such a cool guy.
He is he's like an honorary EC artist. It's so cool.
Yeah. And he's still like amazed by that. The last time I talked to him was at Cal Comic Con in January, I think it was. But he was there and he said, yeah, it was just crazy that I had EC covers. I kind of did EC covers. And I was like, yeah, you did. Very cool.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone for listening. I'd appreciate if you give this channel a like and subscribe on YouTube, a like on Spotify, leave a review on iTunes. Check us out on Dads from the Crypt Talk on TikTok. And with that, we thank you for Dads from the Crypt.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.